Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Al Jazeera of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka yet another goddamn Testament album.
And I am the black metal guy, aka limited edition Agalloch merch discounted to 75%.
I love how they were the biggest band in the world for like 2 years, and now nobody gives a shit anymore.
No, the people who didn't listen to metal, who liked not listening to Agalloch, have moved on to not listening to other things.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm kind of into heavy metal sometimes. You ever listen to, like, Agalloch? I like him because it's like, you know, it's not just, like, growling, man. It's more progressive.
Yeah, it's like this really original thing. It's like black metal, but it's also kind of like folk, you know?
I always wondered about the people who describe them as, like, a black metal band. It's like, that has nothing to do with black metal in any way. Like...
You'd have to go back really far. There were blast beats on some of their early... it's like...
first record or
you know what? The best... I think we did our last special section, right? We were talking about Hades, and I think Agalloch came up. I think there's like one or two good Agalloch songs, and they sound like Eternus.
Yeah,
or you can hear that connection.
I mean, it's totally inoffensive music. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's the worst thing in the world.
Oh, no, I think it's offensive for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy metal elevator music to me, so it's like...
Wheedly, woodly, wheedly, woodly, wheedly, woodly. So
first off, big... This is the part where your local metalcore band posts the video of 30 seconds of just them heading to China and some feedback, and it says "big things coming." Well, the big things are here, so of course we want to invite in and welcome and thank all of the new people who are listening because of our newfound affiliation with Grizzly Butts. And you're the one who actually handled that, so you deal with that.
Well, thanks to Grizzly Butts for reaching out to us and getting in touch, and for setting us up with a indefinitely persisting platform on his site. Grizzly Butts is, as far as the well-trafficked sort of online, well-trafficked blogs, text-based metal criticism, by far our favorite, and he's and it's really cool that we were going to reach out to him eventually, probably, so it's really cool that he got in touch with us. He's given he did a nicely written up primer to all our old episodes with all 16 posts, nice lead in, and he'll just be, when we put something out new, he'll be putting it out with the links and stuff on his site and on his social media. So thanks again, dude.
Yeah, we'll probably we'll probably try to do some more stuff kind of incorporating that relationship at one point or another, but for now, thanks a lot, man.
We're definitely gonna have him on the show, obviously. We got
100%. I mean if he's insane enough to listen to all this shit when we've got, or I guess when we had, 50 listeners a week, clearly he's for real about it, so clearly it'd be good to talk to. All right, and we got some other housekeeping. Let's see, real quick, shout out to David Santos from Niall Obstat, who commented on our YouTube. Really appreciate him coming by and showing his support.
He didn't even mention he was in Niall Obstat. He was just like, "Hi, it's David from Colombia." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Are you here for the Colombian brutal death? Do you like Niall Obstat?"
And then I was like, "I think that's one of the guys." And then I confirmed, oh, yeah, but it's David from Niall Obstat. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's an understated approach, right? There have been a few other people who've reached out over the last week or two in various ways, and, people who've engaged on Instagram and whatnot. Thanks, everyone. And other than that, we've got some... We should plug our latest episode of Terminus Prime, which I think I'll try to get out later tonight. Last week, the one that came out for last week was a extension of our Reverer Mid Malak thing, where I sort of mock interviewed the death metal guy about his esoteric extreme metal Catholicism. And this week we're back to music with, I think, maybe the tightest and probably most interesting like music one we've done so far.
Yeah.
Where we did Mayhem's Grand Declaration of War and Hades' Within the Realm of the Dying Sun. And
I think it's the dawn. I think it's the dawn of the dying.
Dawn. Sorry. There's the Dead Can Dance album. Yes.
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dying Sun. Yeah. I always confuse those two. Yes, it's just the Dawn of the Dying Sun. But anyway, two albums that could not sound more unalike, but some interesting similarities there.
Yeah, definitely.
And then coming up. In the pipes, in the tubes, we've got an interview with Old Mill that I did a couple weeks ago, and that will be Old Mill Productions has been a steady supporter of our show, and we've enjoyed releasing his stuff. So we will be talking with the label owner, and then tonight we're doing an interview with Oldowan Gash, who we covered last week.
Very excited about that. He reached out to us.
For that. Yeah. So thanks for reaching out, dude. And also, rumor has it that at some point this week or next weekend, we will be recording an interview with Theophanos from Serpent Column. I remember Grizzly Butts is, as far as I know, the only other person who's interviewed him, and he did some nice, very useful text-based interviews with him that are over at his site.
Real quick, social media roundup. You can check us out on Facebook, at Terminus Podcast. And what's the IG tag again?
I think it's just, let's see. It might just be Terminus Extreme Metal.
You can probably just look it up on IG or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you really like this stuff and you want to support us, you can always check us out on Patreon or Subscribestar, link below, where we have a bunch of tiers available. Thanks so much to the people that are currently supporting us, but by doing that at different tiers, you get access to our Terminus Prime bonus episodes, our private Discord server, and if you're a really insane person who just wants to spend a bunch of money, even better and better stuff above that. So definitely do that. If you're coming from Grizzly Butts, give us your money as well as giving him his money. Just,
let me read the tiers real quick.
Sure.
We've got at $3 a month, we've got Crust Punk Grifter. At $5 a month, we've got Black Metal Hermit. At $10 a month, we've got Proletarian Death Metal Bro. At $15 a month, we've got Art Metal Arch Autist. At $20 a month, we've got War Metal Barbarian Werewolf Overlord. And at $50 a month, we've got You Are Literally Danny Filth.
We still have a slot open for a literal Danny Filth, so...
yeah. If you're Danny, if you're out there, we did get a random like on the Instagram from I think Marcus Kressler from fucking Rights of the Gringelade. So
that's
I don't
sick.
think he has $50. I don't think he has $50 a month to give away, but he's a cool person who has actually at least clicked on our social media.
Yeah, but there's all these... I know how you fuckers are. I've been in the metal scene for a while. I know half of you are, like, working at machine shops, but the other half are in IT. I'm sure some of you white-collar JavaScript goons can afford it, so please, give me all your money. I need
well, let's be real. If you're working in the machine shop, you probably make more than me.
More than both of us.
Yeah, that's Proletarian Death Metal, bro.
That is true.
A steady $10 a month.
All right, cool. Let's do our rundown. So I've got the first half of the records for today, and so we're opening up with Meslamtaea's Geketend in de Schaduw van het Leven. I don't speak Dutch. Fucking, how do I know?
The G is probably like a Y, but yeah, who the hell knows? Geketend in de Schaduw van het Leven.
Yeah, so and this is released on Babylon Doom Cult Records, a Belgian label that I'm not familiar with, but seems to be putting out pretty cool stuff so far. And then after that, we've got Cultum Interitum with Poison of Being out on Gods of War. And I think we've covered...
That's Gods with a Z.
Yeah, we covered something on Gods of War before. Was that... the Impiety record, or I can't remember.
No, I don't think so. That was like a nuclear war, or kind of. That might have been a Hell's Headbanger. That was one of the Hell's Headbangers, Nuclear War, or Iron Bonehead.
Okay, yeah.
Odraza was on Gods of War. So this is actually
okay.
This makes sense. Both kind of angular Polish black metal.
Yeah. And what have you got for your half today?
I think Gods of War should reissue Gods of War at War by Macabre Oben. So then you could say it's Gods of War at War by Gods of War. So we've got I thought it had we'd been on a while of, just black and death metal, and then for a minute we've had 2 episodes that were pretty much just solidly kind of glorious pagan black metal. So we thought because hey, that's what's happening now, and who am I to complain? But I thought, let's throw something new in the mix. So this is a sludge band called Him from Norway, and this record is called Breach Us. It's their second album. It's out on Physisk Format Records, which seems to do more sort of punk and noise and arty stuff. And I really liked their first record, which seemed to be a much more sort of brutal and extreme take on sludge than the sort of beardo stuff you usually get. So we'll see how this new one is. And then, last but certainly not least, is The Confessor by Pennsylvania's Dumal. And this is out on, I believe, both the excellent Folkvangr records and one called Vigor Deconstruct, which I don't know.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I wonder if that's just
Folkvangr
like
will be doing a tape, I assume. I think they're tapes only.
I wonder if Vigor Deconstruct is like a personal imprint or something like that of the
Could
band.
be.
A lot of those guys do that.
And yeah, so this, I'll get into it more later, but these guys were ahead of the curve on some current trends 3 years ago. They released a very promising first record, wanted to check in, and yeah, this new one rips, so we're excited to talk about it.
All right, so let's open up with Meslamtaea, which I guess is a band that we both have a little bit of familiarity with. We were talking a little bit about this before we got on. So over the past couple weeks, there haven't really been releases by bands that I'm super familiar with, but I saw Meslamtaea had a new one, and I had their New Era record back in 2005. I don't remember.
They've been around that long?
They've been been around since the late 90s. They didn't release anything until 2004. And, when I say they, it's mostly been a one-man project of Floris Velthuis until a new vocalist was brought in just a couple of years ago. But I think you know a little bit more about, like, the associated acts with these guys?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me... let's just do associated acts first, and then, so this seems to basically be the same guys as... Let me just check. Yeah, as a band called Asgrauw, which is also the same 2 dudes. Or no, Asgrauw also has a third guy. They have another guitarist and vocalist in it. But 2 of the dudes from Asgrauw are in this. And Asgrauw is a more straightforward black metal band.
Yeah.
And it's and Meslamtaea is their more... How would you describe it?
Well, like on the Bandcamp for this one and the last record, which I also accidentally listened to because they have very similar album art, so I've got more context now. They describe it as like kind of progressive, which I guess is a little true, but it doesn't sound proggy. Obviously, they're pulling influences from screamo and post-hardcore. But as well as just like a really rich tradition of European black metal. So, I mean, it's pretty varied, I'd say.
Yeah, and I just wanted to real quick, some of our listeners might not be that familiar with the Dutch scene, and this is something of a micro-obsession of mine. I think you could say that, for me, I think in terms of quality relative to quantity and sort of density of the country, I think that the Dutch scene might be my favorite going today. And there are really sort of two sides to the Dutch scene, but they kind of interact, and Meslamtaea is right in the middle of, or is kind of draws on both. Right?
Yeah, they're bridging the gap between these more aggressive dissonant bands and these more kind of melodic progressive ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all kind of melodic, but yeah, certainly these more, yeah. Basically, if there's a Dutch black metal sound in general, I think it usually relates to the weather. I think, which it should in any country, but it's kind of windswept and gray, but constantly shifting. And maybe there's a little more light than you'd get in Scandinavia. Yeah. But a sort of a mutable feeling in the riffs and the feeling of being close to the sea and the biting wind. And also, I think kind of an urban sensibility to some of it.
Yeah, which we'll be talking about, because that's something we've touched on before in previous episodes.
I guess that's really one way you could define the division. There's kind of a nature-y... so there's one scene concentrated around Hidden's Heart Records, which is probably one of my favorite labels, that's also been going a very long time. And in this side, the Dutch really sort of, starting in the early 2000s, if not earlier, the Dutch preserved that kind of what we were talking about last time with Sviderna, that kind of marginal late 90s Swedish and to some extent Norwegian sound.
Yeah.
And just generally the second wave sound and the more pagan sounding side of the second wave sound that never got that much play.
Yeah.
And preserved that, but developed it in relation to stuff like everything else that was happening in the underground BM scenes that had sprung up around the world, especially the Slavic stuff. Mm-hmm. So Hidden's Heart is a very kind of distinctive Nordic, but also much more sort of punky and stripped down and barbaric approach to those kinds of sounds. And Asgrauw's a really good, has done a record on Hidden's Heart, at least one, and they're definitely in that vein, alongside Cultus, which is the guy who runs Hidden's Heart. Cultus, one of the only bands I've ever heard to actually name drop Soren. Kjeld, who sound like they're from 1997 and have an amazing drummer. Standvast, which is like very sort of sullen Ildjarn beat music. And one called Untar, which is kind of like a nostalgic, emotional Graveland.
That sounds pretty good.
Then there's this... Yeah, no, you'd like it. Yeah. And then there's this other side of the scene, which is the more arty side of the scene, right? And this stuff is more urban. The first one is more like barbarian warrior. This is more urban and more arty. So Meslamtaea is certainly on this side, and alongside them I'd place Laster.
Yeah, I've heard of Laster.
Really closely related. You'd also like Laster a lot. Laster is less black metal and more just fully on the side of post-black, but via like post-punk and screamo and post-hardcore. And you could also say Flusterars, who've been doing this forever, but also kind of span both sides. And related to that, there's Hyresis Novio Magi, which is this set of kind of cool tape label bands that all share members and have this very kind of droney, psychedelic kind of Dutch take on BBH thing.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, that's my overview of the Dutch scene, and Meslamtaea is kind of coming at it from both sides. Let's start with you and with your sample. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'll just crank up a sample real quick, and, so let's just listen to basically the opening riff, or a couple riffs off the first track, Inktsvart. And as soon as you hear it, you're going to be like, oh, this is a death metal guy black metal sample. All right, so let's give that a shot. Isn't that, as soon as you heard that riff, the first time you listened to it, you're like, oh, my co-host is going to sample that, right?
Well, yeah, but it also's got a lot for me.
That's
I think. True. The second riff, the really sort of, that screamo kind of riff at the end with all the complicated steps in it, that's got that sort of like balls to the wall sort of sentimentality to it that you like. Yeah. And I like that they really, at that point, they really just swing for it. There's a
lot of dramatic mood shifts on this record, and I think they pretty much always land them. So for me, I mean, go ahead.
Oh yeah, what I was going to say about the first riff, that black metal riff is, so that could almost be an Asgrauw riff. I think if there's a difference in the writing, it's that these riffs are all a little more on the melancholic side, although the last Asgrauw had a lot of that too. And there's much more of an emphasis here on twinned leads. And that's a big epic consonant riff, but the way it's hard, it's got this kind of cutting, cold quality to the leads that I think is very Dutch.
Yeah.
And they're sort of counterpointing in a way that, I guess, as I try to outline what I like about certain kinds of melodic riffs, I say this all the time, but they're counterpointing in a way that builds more tension in. There's a little more, there's friction between the two guitar parts in a way that I think is kind of cool.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, you're always looking for something with a little bit more of an aggressive edge, even when it's really sugary.
Yeah, although there are plenty parts on this record, as we'll hear, that are really sugary, where I'm just like, yes, hell yeah, let's go.
So I really love this because obviously that opening riff is just, that's an A-plus riff. That's an A-plus riff on any record, you know. But then when that...
it's gorgeous, yeah.
When that clean part hits, I was like, holy shit, this is like a black metal version of like an Indian summer song. Like a classic... like a classic mid-90s emo band. And that's something we're going to keep touching on because there's a...
Oh, sure.
There's a tremendous, but probably to a lot of people, understated screamo and emo influence on this record. But in this case, I strongly believe this is a case of these people actually listening to that music. Not just imitating it from other bands, but they know the origins of how that music is constructed. And
yeah, there's been a trickle down from that's been really destructive for black metal because even the people who originated the trend didn't really understand the music.
Yeah.
And these guys seem to be going to the source.
Well, I guess kind of my thesis about the album is, and this is also going to be based off me listening to the one previous to that, which is, that I accidentally heard, called Niet en Niemendal, which is a good record, not as strong as this, but a good record. Where one of the fascinating things about this music is that melodically, obviously, you're descended from European black metal, but there's also a lot of just kind of like chord structure work, which is much more similar to rock music, but it's harmonized extremely differently in this black metal tradition. And the previous record is honestly like almost a half rock or like alt rock record, but they still pull it off. They still nail it. So I think what's happening here is Meslamtaea is basically looking towards the early origins of this whole post-black style, like the original Alcest stuff, the very first stuff that was coming out. And it's sort of imagining a world where, because now post-black is just, Cascadian black metal plus shoegaze or post-rock, right?
And watered down ideas of what those mean.
Yeah, and
there's been a game
definitely.
of telephone where they just think it's like having a lot of reverb and playing like da 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 da.
In this case, like, there's a real deep understanding of these kind of outside metal influences, and it results in music that's much more rich and much more authentic than all the people kind of pretending to that throne. So that's why it's a really sophisticated record, and I would even call it like a very tasteful record in a way, which is usually not something I'd like to call a black metal record, but it really works here.
It is tasteful, it is sophisticated. I mean, Laster is also very good at doing this sort of thing. But again, in Laster, it's more fully to the sort of post side of things. This is very well integrated. I think you say it right. Even when you hear a lot of the screamo-y stuff here, or the post-punk or rockish parts. There are black metal voicings or black metal ideas that are inflecting all of it. And vice versa, even in that big opening double lead trem line that had a kind of grim feel to it, it also had a very wistful, kind of melancholic kind of feel, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely, it's cutting into, because for everyone to know, so
it had a delicacy to it. Even the heavy parts have a kind of delicacy to it.
Yeah, well, to clarify to the audience, so the theme of this record, and I think the theme of the previous record is probably the same, is a sort of like, it's definitely very like eco. And it's about, like, personal isolation in the urban environment and a yearning to reconnect with nature. So it very definitely bridges that sort of natural versus urban divide you were talking about in the scenes.
Yeah, and I think it's very preoccupied just with, like, collapse. Asgraaw's Isval is the one that came out this year. I think their one before that, Grunspec, was a little better. And had this beautiful, eerie kind of Dutch windmill landscape cover. But Isval is good too. And I think partly I just listened. I got to Grunspec late, so I listened to Isval right after it. Yeah. And it kind of diminished the impact for me. But Isval's really great, and it's got their description of the themes there is something like, Isval is neither a glorification nor a warning of what awaits. Asgrauw does not believe in the day of judgment, but they are sure that the end is near. An ending that is set by humanity itself and what we deserve. Not a quick death, but a slow process of torment and pain. A procedure that will unleash civil wars, while hidden remains from the Ice Age will be resuscitated. Only the strongest will survive. But for how long? So if Asgraaw's the more sort of purely nature-y, inhuman black metal take on that, this is very much more, as you say, it's like human. It's about being an individual in this context. The cover is a guy in disaster survival gear or, future paramilitary gear sucking oxygen from a glass jar containing a tree with fallen leaves.
That's awesome.
Which is a perfect combination of black metal and screamo imagery, right?
It would also be like a perfect Crust cover if Crusties were smart enough to do something like that,
It's close to a good version of these kinds of awful, sentimental, epic Crust records that were coming out in the early 2000s, where they had someone playing violin, and there was like ruins and like one beautiful rose rising from the ruins, and it's like only we with the tender flame in our hearts can like claim the rose and like resurrect Gaia.
All right, let's get to
the wolves are crying. The wolves are crying.
Let's get to a sample of yours. Let's talk about music.
Yeah, Verdumd. Speaking of collapse, this is Verdumd Wereld, which I assume means foredoomed world. There's some good, and you'll hear a method that I think reappears throughout this.
Okay, let's try it out. that's great.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's just
I love how that little 2-chord like chopping riff is. That's echoing actual primordial emotional hardcore. You know, those are the kind of things that you would hear on like an Antioch Arrow song or a Moss Icon song or something.
Or on an Unsane album, right? You know,
yeah, that's true. It could be noise rock.
Played lower on the fretboard. That'd be and why do we call it noise rock? Right? It's really just a hardcore subgenre. But hey, it's not noise rock. It's hardcore for nerds. It was really a screamo or post-hardcore riff for sure. And they, again and again on this record, you'll hear them set up a screamo idea using black metal ideas, or vice versa. But often the former. So it's like so you get this sort of, at the beginning and end of that sample, you get this extremely Dutch black metal riffing. And I was trying to think of, how do you define that sound? Well, it occupies this kind of emotional in-between territory relative to the things we're familiar with, like, evil, or on the other hand, sort of like triumphant and grandiose. It's kind of, Dutch riffing is kind of just resolute.
Yeah, it's operating in kind of a liminal space between these standard emotional ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, it's like a liminal between northern and continental Europe and all this stuff. It's makes sense as an idea. It's sort of just stern, but with an undertone of sentiment. And they set up melodically. There's this big sort of folk riff, pretty triumphant folk riff, and that sets up the screamo part. And then they just do so much cool shit with the screamo part, right? It's not a throwaway gesture. They just like, first of all, they're like, why not do this? And then second of all, they're like, why not keep playing it? And you do your weird sort of, you do your reverby leads over it. And then we bring 2 guitars in over it, and we just hammer it like it's a Bathory riff. Right?
Yeah.
and then back out into the black metal. I think that's a really well done sequence.
Yeah, well, they keep using the little choppy hardcore riff as like an interrupter for these more elaborate ideas.
Yeah. I've got a sample I could play here, or after my next one, or at the end. Maybe since I did a long intro, let's just get through all this and then see if we have time for this. The related source sample.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So next up, we've got Shemmerdal.
So I could. I figured we should close with yours because it's kind of climactic moment. So we'll do another one. So this is another version of that method, but I want to play in rapid succession 2 parts of this song because I think it's important to hear the beginning.
Yeah, that clean part could literally just be like a mineral riff or something.
Who's Mineral? That
Midwest emo band.
Word. Yeah, no, it's very, speaking of Midwest emo, that could be a Bear versus Shark riff. A very, very, like a very sort of playful part. Yeah, that's sort of screamo post-hardcore stuff at its most playful, and as I wrote in the comments, that's sort of anime flashback levels of screamo.
The plaid skirts are blustering in the spring wind.
Exactly.
As you
can
look
see the
butterfly.
Summer, Yeah, you can see the butterfly. You can see the sort of coy but longing look in sort of what's a good Japanese girl name?
Kimiko's eyes or something.
Yeah, Kimiko's eyes. Yeah, you remember what it was like before the demons came. And then we'll go. And then the track just sort of turns around into this. All right.
So let's try the next.
You can hear the turnaround here. Yep.
Yeah, that's so sick.
Yeah, that last riff is how being an eagle sitting on top of a mountain sounds. You know. So.
Well, it's I definitely get the Nordic vibes that you're talking about, but there's also because I think that in our understanding of like emo, you're way better versed in American stuff, and I'm better versed in Japanese stuff. Because that is a very, like, Japanese screamo effect that was happening there.
Oh, I could hear that, too. Well, Envy just does sound pretty black metal, right?
Oh, no, well, most Japanese screamo accidentally sounds like black metal. A lot of the time, that is true.
Yeah, well, we've sort of talked about how that might be the reason that there's not that much Japanese black metal, is that screamo's their version of it.
Oh yeah, and we'll get into that with my next sample, but yeah, I mean it's outstanding, and there you get to see the real range of moods on this record, and you know usually I'm not into these sort of like neck snapping like tonal shifts, but this band really executes those super well.
And I don't the key is I don't think it's neck snapping. It's like they hit on it has to do with that Dutch liminality thing. Mm-hmm. They hit on this mood that has gradients within it. Does that make sense? It's like
I get you. They're operating within kind of like a subtler idea of these shades of mood.
Yeah, and it's we never really go because of the way it's being played and arranged. It never really goes full. We're never really at full Viking. Yeah. But it's like a shade of that comes in. The cool thing is, a good example of this is like, as that riff comes in, right? We're blasting from the beginning of that sample, but you get this more kind of Nordic riff, and then it's answered by this like, duh. I mean, I can't remember it, but this kind of like, one of these sort of melancholy, this sort of playful, delicate major key melodies, right? Mm-hmm. And then still in the blasts, and they trade off almost like a classical music thing. It's like the moods are fighting.
Yeah, there's an operatic quality to this, which is interesting because it's really condensed. These are mostly, pretty relatively short songs for the kind of scope that they operate in. So I've got one last sample, and we're supposedly a metal show, but I keep talking about all the most emo parts of this record. But this is off Illusi, which is probably the like really climactic song of the record. It's 5 out of 7.
I agree. Yeah. I would have picked this part, or if you didn't, or part near it.
It's so fucking sick. So let's just listen to this passage I chose.
Oh.
It's so cool. It's so fucking cool, man.
Yeah, that's...
So I think more than any other part on this record, that really pushes that Japanese screamo vibe. Like, that is... So obviously the execution's very envy. The way they go from the clean guitar over thrash part, which is fucking sick.
That's really cool.
Into that just like squalling, like immediate solo over the riff. You don't repeat the riff a couple times before the solo comes in. You punch in with it is something that Heaven in Her Arms does a lot. I love all the varied elements on this, and it's clearly the way that it's patterned, the way that it's structured is okay. This guy's actually listening to Envy and Heaven in Her Arms, because it's not the way a black metal climax works. It's a screamo climax that is using kind of black metal musical terminology in it, which is a great way to do it.
And it really brings in terms of there being some sort of consistent undertone of mood to this record with these different aspects of it that are related to different styles. Here's all of them at once.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a climax, and it also just has all the different parts of the record at once.
I love it when
blast beats.
I love it when someone can pull off that kind of cacophony correctly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, that was a great cacophony. And so you got your blast beats, you got your screamo influences, you got your kind of black metal-y riffing, you've got a mood that has this screamo-y tenderness to it, and is also really angry. What's key there, in part to the aggression in that passage, is the saxophone.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
And this is the first time I've heard a saxophone in black metal, and been down at all. And not only am I down, I'm like, fuck yes, because this record already sort of established the mood for it. It wasn't crazy to me when it came in. When it was first mellow, I was like, oh god, are we about to get mellow sax throughout? But then when the guy just wails, he's drawing on, like, there are two jazz traditions you can draw on in black metal, I think, most explicitly. We talk a lot on the show about the influence of free jazz on extreme music in general.
Yeah.
So just like squealing, harmonics-based saxophone like Albert Ayler or something, free jazz. And on the other hand, the ECM sort of cold Nordic jazz tradition, or Euro jazz tradition, or stuff like Keith Jarrett even, or whatever, or a saxophonist named Jan Garbarek. Very cold tone, and some of it sounds pretty black metal. And these, I feel kind of like those vibes fit very naturally into music like this, and because it's already so urban, it's like, okay, here's our saxophone.
Yeah, and I think you were also comparing part of this to Swarm, who also would incorporate like a sax a lot of the time on like.
Oh, would they? That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's been years since I listened to their old stuff, but then I listened to their new one, and you'd love it because it's almost very rockish, and it's almost entirely cleans with blasting.
Yeah,
clean guitar with blasting.
Swarm is like a fascinating band because they're outstanding, no doubt, but it's like Swarm was the metal scene's introduction to Envy, because when Swarm came out, metalheads didn't know about Japanese screamo, and Swarm is basically Envy with some old school grindcore in it, which is a great idea. I don't want to knock them for that at all. Those albums are amazing, but that's basically what's happening there.
Oh sure, no, it's like that a lot for sure. So that's. I mean, contrast that with certain trendy albums that use saxophones. Like, there was that White Ward record everyone loved.
I saw you noted that. I have no idea. I actually like that record. I don't know. That was pretty good.
I have no idea how that came out of the Ukraine, man. I've no idea how Roman and the boys let that one slide past them. Like, you think there's a 6'5" bouncer at the front of the sort of Ukrainian black metal distribution facility. If he sees something like that, we'll just confiscate it. But at the beginning, I was just like, I was along for the ride. I was like, okay, this is very atmospheric, very urban. I'm open-minded now. I can listen to this. And then the sax comes in, and I'm like, oh, hell no. We're not going there.
I guess it doesn't bother me because I don't really think of that as like actual black metal. It's just kind of using some black metal technique, you know?
I know. Even so, I don't like smooth saxophone.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You want it harsh and squalling, as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, squalling or sort of just, melodic. Yeah, a little bit of the smooth sax at the beginning of this track, given the way that it goes, a little bit of that is cool and just makes just makes it more anime soundtrack.
Yeah, I think there's... I mean, we obviously, we kind of talk off and on joking about, like, the anime soundtrack. I think there's really a substantial kind of Japanese influence across this record, which is really interesting, combined with this in a way, very traditional sort of Western European meeting Northern European black metal sensibility.
For sure. One of the many cool things about Attack on Titan is that there's literally a screamo song in the soundtrack, like Jay Screamo.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So real quick, what was that kind of outside sample that you wanted to play?
Oh yeah, if we got time. So what I thought, we could also play them some Indian Summer, because it's so repetitive. You could do like a minute of that.
But I forget which Indian
Angry
Summer
Sun.
song is great. Oh, Angry Sun, is that the one?
Angry Sun, yep.
You want to do that one?
I got it already. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I can pull it up.
Okay. Yeah, it's just one of the first... Yeah, it's the 726.
Oh, yeah, Angry Sun. Yeah, okay,
Spiros,
of course.
Posted by Spiros K.
We'll just play a minute and a half of that, yeah.
Billy moves on. A voice in the back of his head reminding him that this is stolen. This is not his. All these moments, these precious time spent moments of gravity. All this anxious waiting. All this time spent waiting. All this pain that you know. All this effortless moving. All this pain that you will ever know. From waking hours. Time spent in this moment.
Yeah, so there's definitely no way these guys haven't heard this.
Well, it's funny, because if you're a metal guy at this point, you've heard those riffs all over modern black metal, things kind of like that. Mm-hmm. Here's where they come from. And similarly, like, everyone knows that sort of associates things like that generically with, like, screamo or emo.
Yeah.
Here's one of the sources, right?
Yeah. Of course, when they're doing it in black metal, usually they're missing all the detail that really makes something like that work, you know?
Ironically, the chording in that riff is closer to real black metal chording with shifting power chords, shifting chords, and sort of dress up on the chords than the screamo black metal that imitates it.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Yeah.
Who are playing post rock meets Nargaroth, pretty much.
Yeah, bling 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 bling. So that's Indian Summer kicking Deaf Heaven's ass. This is, I know, yeah. So that's cool. And then the other thing I wanted to play was the Chameleons. Have you heard of these guys? Have I geeked about them to you?
I've like vaguely heard of them. I'm not like super familiar though.
So let's go to. I posted it in the in our notes. Back up over.
Yeah, it was Second Skin from 40 on.
One cold evening, the world stood still. I watched as I held my breath. Still, I thought I knew
Yeah, that's pretty nice. That's definitely going in my my mopey English guy playlist.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real source for you could hear, right, the kind of the things that people always refer to in black metal reviews as like post-black reviews as like glistening tremolo parts or like whatever, right?
I mean, yeah, it's just like reverb and flange on a lead guitar. I mean, it's
exactly, yeah, it's exactly. It's not like a. I mean, even when the Chameleons did it, it wasn't exactly. There were parts in Joy Division and Cure songs where people had done that, but it became really significant in the Chameleon sound, and I think the specific way it's played with this very sort of open minor key tonality. It has also the Chameleon script of the bridge is all about liminal moods. In the way that's the record. In the same way, it's got a very weird cover that's objectively bad but conceptually excellent.
Yeah, I saw
it's
that.
sort of like
it's pretty
weird
ugly.
80s graphic design. Yeah, ugly 80s graphic design, but all of the things in it are good.
Yeah, that's true.
The form, the structure is there, but but yeah, so that kind of guitar, that thin, echoing, reverby lead guitar is big in the background on the Meslamtaea record, especially on one or two of the samples we pulled. Mm-hmm. And the Chameleons, people often associate that with things like, earlier post-punk bands, but the Chameleons is really the most typical for that, and also they would have had a big influence on post-rock bands like Mogwai, who listens to a ton of goth and post-punk. And last thing is, some people lots of a whole idea of what post-punk is that people associate with bands like Joy Division really has way more to do with this.
Dale, turn left. No, not this one again.
Okay, we're done.
Hey, Meslamtaea, it's a fucking sick record. And also, real quick, people should know, it's formatted as a whole piece. The songs bleed into each other, so listening to it as a full piece is definitely the way to go. You should definitely check it out. Really good record. I was really impressed, and the last one was just last year, so hopefully we'll get another one in 2021, and I'm excited for that.
That would be awesome. Yeah, great stuff.
All right, so let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with something with a decidedly different mood.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
So next up, we've got another very random find on my part, Cultum Interitum, Poison of Being. So what have you got for this one, man?
Well, on now that I'm running the Terminus Instagram, Terminus Extreme Metal, Instagram.insta, I've been following this site that posts old Mayhem photos, the old Mayhem, and they had one with some picture of Euronymous with a quote from him that said something like, "I don't want to be respected. I want to be hated and feared." And I feel like that sums up this sort of the attitude here. They're not going for. They're not trying to impress anyone. They just want to make evil black metal.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like I kind of wanted to say we cover so much like really kind of like nice melodic stuff. It's good to go back to remembering. Oh, black metal's supposed to be really evil and sinister, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I picked this up because I was just looking for new stuff to put on the show, and I was looking at Godz of War. They did like a few releases at the same time as this. I think this was just last week this came out, and Godz of War mostly does like war metal stuff, which is fine, but it's just not really my thing for the most part. And there were plenty of releases that that were basically good but didn't really catch my ear. But this one did, because I guess the thesis for this is like, I think of this as war metal way slowed down. in a sense, if that's something you can imagine. You know what I mean? Because what is war metal ultimately? You know, I mean, so I think of it as like this Black Death stuff where the interest is more in texture than riffs. Because people say stuff like Revenge and Blasphemy and Archgoat are all war metal, but none of them actually sound like each other. So how do we define that niche, so to speak?
I think those things all sound like each other.
Do you?
Sort of. At least, kind of. I mean, let me just devil's advocate here. I mean, obviously, they're all sort of formative for their own They're all formative for their own micro genres, so they all sound different enough, like, by a lot. But, what if, like, minimum requirements, like, melodic minor scales with a lot of random dissonant intervals, sort of bludgeoning mid-tempo blasting, emphasis on sort of power chords, at least for this kind of war metal. And then there's all sorts of different things going on over that, right? Like, I mean, Revenge has this kind of squalling, shriek feedback guitar. Blasphemy is more riffy, right? Archgoat is more... What is Archgoat relative to this? I think I like Archgoat a lot. I've only heard a very little bit.
I think of those three, Archgoat is the most similar to Cultum Interitum, because it's because Archgoat is more like post-Beharit with more like normal kind of rocky stuff in it. It's good. I saw them live once, and a half-hour live set is the perfect way to see something like Archgoat. You know what I mean? It hits the exact spot, and if they played 2 more songs, I would hate it. You know?
I remember it being very moshable in a good way.
Yeah, it's pretty moshable, and this kind of is too in certain places. So, well, let's just start off with a sample, just so people can get the general mood of this stuff. So, let's listen to a little passage off the 3rd track, "Funeral Womb."
Yeah, I think this gets all the basic. This is a good choice. I think you've got all the basic parts for the record.
Yeah, all the this is what you're gonna be hearing. So let's go. Yeah, so that's most of what you're going to be hearing on this record. I mean, that you were right. That is pretty much every constituent part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So what are the parts? Walk us through. We got that blast riff.
You've got the kind of like Archgoat blast riff. Then the most interesting part is
kind of frantic drumming under it, which I think is cool.
And then after that, you've got what is a sort of a mosh riff, if you think about it, like a mosh tremolo riff of just that hanging open note with that little fill on the end.
Oh, could be a metalcore riff if you changed things about how the sound. Also more than that, you said in the notes, you mentioned Old Inquisition. I think that's absolutely right. So I'm thinking in particular, that's one of my favorite Inquisition riffs, actually.
Oh yeah,
although that's probably 15 of them. But
I was thinking of like what's the one that they fucking constantly play live, like it's off. I think it's off Invoking the Majestic Throne of Satan. It's
Kill with Hate. Kill with Hate is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
but,
Kill with Hate is one of them. I was thinking of I thought it was called like Skull Crushing Black Metal or something along the lines of
I don't think that's by them.
No, there's definitely it's probably got a more elaborate song title or something, but it's something to that effect.
Something the Skull Throne of Satan. That's
Oh, I think it might be Nefarious Dismal Orations. But yeah, it's just like it's a one riff song. It's just like that one that's just like dun 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 dun, and they play that for like 4 minutes and it rules. So you've got you've got the kind of mosh riff, which could be Inquisition. It could also be. Again, it could be Archgoat. It could be
Archgoat. Yeah,
it could be Profanatica occasionally, and then you've got
it's a pretty uniquely kind of black metal mosh riff. That you'd like to hear more.
And then you get into that weird sort of doomy part, which is much more akin to Beherit or something like very primordial to the kind of war metal sound. So. Obviously, a lot of this record is kind of like sewn together parts from other bands. I mean, we've touched on a lot of the big influences. I would also say that Demon Sea is in here, and Grave Upheaval, particularly just in like the production quality of... It's like, it's cavernous, but it's sort of like claustrophobic at the same time, you know? It's not ringing empty space, it's filled space, in a sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of it really comes down to the execution. Like, the production's phenomenal. The vocal performance is one of the standout elements of this record, because it's just so disgusting and evil all the time. But, yeah. So, I mean, what are kind of your overall impressions of this music? I've been talking for a bit.
I got a complimentary thing for that. Why don't we just, for the fans, let's get another sample in there, and then I think I can use that to preface my own thoughts. My own thoughts are pretty consistent with yours. I've just got a different, a complementary angle.
Okay,
so
cool.
Let's go to Soul Desecration. This is towards the end of the first track, and this is another kind of mosh part. Let's go there.
Let's try it.
And it just keeps going on like that till the end.
I love how hilariously evil this music is. It's so self-consciously, it's like they want to make the most evil thing possible. And it mostly works.
Yeah, I think their other band is, do you remember being in our early 20s or late teens where we would just listen to music like this, like, on a sunny afternoon?
Oh yeah, like when
when
you showed me Ride for Revenge, and I would just like listen to that like at my shitty day job or something.
Yeah, no, I remember just being like, oh, another sunny afternoon, time to listen to Bloodstone, Hour of the Gate, or like Barathrum Vitriol by Absu.
Oh God.
Which isn't even a good record. I think I remember just listening to that a couple times.
I never liked any of the Absu records, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, they've got some songs, I think. But what is it? Shield. Is it shield with an eye? Shield with an iron face. That's fucking sick. Cultum Interitum. Yeah. So about this, I think my take on it is, so speaking of Ride for Revenge, that is something this is like. Right?
Yeah.
Ride for Revenge is very close socially to a lot of Finnish war metal bands.
Yeah, they are.
And there are a few songs they have with blast beats, and those whole songs really...
In a sense, Ride for Revenge are the closest thing to original Beharit, in a way. You know, they're really
slow Beharit,
flying the flag for that stuff. Just because you got this distinct thing in Finnish black metal where this bizarre split between this like nightmarish basement energy and this like really sophisticated, ornate, romantic, melodic stuff. And Ride for Revenge are kind of still the carriers of the first one there. You know?
Yeah. So Ride for Revenge are interesting because those who do not understand will call it doomy, but they don't work like doom riffs at all. They're extremely kinetic. They're not sort of... Doom, to me, tends to be plotting most of the time. They're sort of... and they're not sludgy. They're sort of hyper slow, moshable body music riffs at their best. And that part that we just pulled, the da 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 da, it's like that riff wants to move a little bit faster and maybe be a two-step, but the drums are slowing it down.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, if you played that 40 BPM faster, you could like murder people in a pit to that. You know?
Yeah, and at this point, what you could do is sort of sway intensely in a pit.
Well, what's also interesting is, because I was listening to that riff, and it's like, that riff could also be a couple other things. One, it could be like a slow Morbid Angel riff.
Ride for Revenge would never harmonize it like that. Ride for Revenge plays strictly power chords.
Yeah. But here's another thing. Couldn't it also kind of be like a Fluids riff?
Yeah. I mean, that's the sort of hardcore quality in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And, what are they doing? Are they playing two leads, just one half step out of step, or are they playing, like, out of tune the same note?
I think they're starting the riff, and then halfway through they're splitting off like a half step from each other in the guitars. Something like that.
That's really cool. So that's extremely brutal and cool. So I guess my reference point for this record, I think describing it as war metal is a good reference point. It's kind of BM, kind of DM, is definitely in this definitely in the wheelhouse you described. But I think this band is strongly defined by an idea, and it's one of those idea bands that sort of is adjacent to or networks with tons of different stuff, and you can't really pin down anything that it sounds like except for it, right? Mm-hmm. So, a few other things. This also could be a very organic take on industrial black metal, right?
Yeah, could be.
That extraordinarily dissonant, sawing, rising riff could be like one of those Skin Chamber wind-up riffs.
Yeah, that's where I get back to that kind of like Demon Sea or like early Black Funeral comparison. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that is also war metal adjacent would be the heaviest side of French Orthodox. That is the side we both like, right? Which is Eosoth.
Yeah, Eosoth rules.
And the vocalist in particular, his performance, these kinds of gruff, kind of declaratory, short-clipped phrases reminds me a lot of MKM. So, Eosoth or like, what if Antaeus was slow? Right?
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
This is willfully retarded in the way Antaeus is.
What's your next one? You got here's the what you saw as a big climax, which I'm interested to hear because I couldn't detect anything like that on the record.
Well, that's like with Eosoth too. The big climax will hit and you'll be like, they do have big climactic moments, but they really make you work for it. Here I'm thinking relative to everything else, to me, this is the big climax riff on Chalice of Omega.
Oh, well, I can see why you like that part, because that big riff could definitely be a stripped-down version of something you would have heard on that Pro Sanctus and Fairy record we covered a couple episodes ago.
True, yeah, and also with that sort of ringing, da 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 da. That's the one consonant interval on this whole record. I think it's like, oh shit, it's a fifth.
I was about to say, yeah, it's like oh, finally we've got a high fifth in here, thank God.
Yeah, da da da. Duh. And it hangs, it's kind of hollowed out, and it's hanging and chorded, and it's buzzes, right, in this really cool way. So I feel like that, and interval-wise, that works like a Demisteris Dom Satanus riff, kind of, right?
Yeah. A very stripped-down version of it, but yes.
Yeah, dissonant thing, switch into very dissonant thing that sort of shifts in this fluid way to suddenly acquire a epic, grandiose tonality.
Oh yeah, so it's like the main riff on "Buried by Time and Dust." That da 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 da. That little standard interval at the end to tie the chromatic stuff together.
Yeah, exactly. Or the way he'll take a really flowing epic riff and at the end he'll fuck it, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of like that. And I think it's kind of like an Aosoth riff, too, because Aosoth uses these big block chords and just lets them hang, right?
Yeah.
Over really fast.
Whereas these guys exclusively operate on two strings unless
they'll never...
Yeah.
but there's a similar skronkiness to it. Which I appreciate.
A lot of this record is just kind of like, you've got these war metal things, and you've also got these gestures towards, like, second wave, very traditional second wave melodic ideas, but it's just stripped down and distilled into this like hyper minimal execution, which is why I keep going back to kind of those like Profanatica Havohe comparisons, because there's a similar idea going on there of you're getting something almost entirely new just because you've reduced this so much, which is, I mean, in essence, like hardcore technique. But I've got one last sample. So this is off the final track, Desecration of Light. And these are just two really sick Archgoat parts right next to each other. So let's give it a shot.
That just swaying mosh riff, right? That's like a Ride for Revenge rhythm right? You can
Definitely.
windmill to it, but you can also just sort of stand there hypnotized, wondering how many beers you've had. Yeah, that was really cool. Don't know what else to say about that.
It's
what is it
it
about the blast riffs that makes them very Archgoat? There.
because Archgoat's blast riffs are so retardedly primitive, like Von level primitive, that they have this austere, like, outsider music quality to them, just because it's like, we can't do a tremolo riff at an important part of the song that's just 2 notes, and they're like, oh, we can, and we're gonna do it on every song. Archgoat riffs do not involve more than 4 notes or 4 chords, man, straight up. Like, it is a dedication to minimalism, and the fact that they keep managing to make more songs out of this incredibly restrictive thing. Seriously, like, Archgoat is like, Archgoat live, fucking awesome. There's no goddamn way I could listen to a full Archgoat album. Well, most Archgoat albums are half an hour long, so it's kind of perfect for that. But it's like, it's just like, it's too fucking much for me a lot of the time. But you, with your dedication to, like, primitive, strident hardcore, will be in love with them instantly.
All right. What say we give the people an Archgoat track to rock out this end of the first half, right? Because Archgoat's not going to sue us.
Yeah, definitely not. So let me think. What would be a good Archgoat song? Real quick, let me because it's like
while you're doing that, I'll just say something for the listeners, which is
sure.
I can't remember where I found this, but I'm pretty sure that Cultum Interitum has some connection to a band called Ars Magna Umbrae.
Yeah. They're a
this
side project of those guys,
which had a new one out called Apotheosis that I was maybe going to cover on the show, but maybe we'll fit it in somewhere. But as far as I heard, they're really cool. Their last album, Lunar Ascension, had this beautiful abstract moon cover art, and the music had this kind of, it was these weird, dissonant, but very beautiful chord sheets that kind of clanged, and it was like, oh, that does sound occult and lunar. So I think this might be I think Cultum Interitum might be the Kriegsmaschine, to their Migla, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. So, so fuck it, let's just do, since you want an Archgoat song, let's just go with the title track off their first album, Whore of Bethlehem. So, we'll throw that one in there, and we will be back after a short break with some more music. right, so next up we've got Him with Breach Us, and I wasn't familiar with these guys, but you were talking on the lead up a little bit about their first record, so give us some background.
Yeah, and that's Him, Hymn, not the sludge band, not HIM, the Hot Topic goth band that was popularized by the fucking jackass dudes.
Bam Margera, yeah.
But, yeah, if you're 30, you remember what I'm talking about.
I remember.
30 or older.
I've never heard a Him
wings
song.
of a butterfly for your soul.
I don't think I've ever heard of a single song by them.
It's one of those things that you assume is awful when you see the people wearing the hoodies and when you're in high school.
Yeah,
and
that
you're
was
like
my
way
logic.
too cool to like it. You're like way too cool to like it. And then I listen to it later and it's just pretty good poppy schlock goth. It's kind of like, you know, it actually sounds sort of like real goth, which was surprising.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So the first record.
Okay. Him. The first record by Norway's Him, the sludge band, was I need to pull up the name here, but it was like came out several years ago, and it was an attempt to solve, I think, what we could call the sludge problem. Neither the death metal guy nor I are generally big fans of sludge.
Apart from the classics, I would say.
Exactly. There are a few bands for each of us that we really like. I really like Neurosis. I think we would agree that I Hate God we love.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Crowbar fan.
Yeah, so there you go. That's a good spectrum. And Crowbar is one of those bands I'm always like, shit, I need to listen to them more.
Yeah, we should cover that on a bonus episode sometime.
Yeah. And there's this whole thing of like, I think High on Fire is not a sludge band, but I do love High on Fire.
Well, a sludge to me means a pretty distinct combination of doom metal and hardcore.
I agree. The term started to become meaningless.
Yeah.
So Him was so what Him were doing was it was kind of down-tempo sludge stuff. There were these sludgy yelling vocals, which this guy does exceptionally well. But it seemed it had a Norwegian coldness to it, just to all the tones. And it also had a willingness to just sit on bludgeoning one-note riffs in this kind of, not in the sort of plodding dong, 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 dong way that a lot of doom bands do.
Yeah.
But in a way with a lot of compression in it and a lot of, like, hardcore energy. Like, you could almost imagine it on the Xibalba record.
Yeah.
And there was this Norwegian black metal influence woven throughout it, but just really subtly in the way that certain chords were done, or the cold guitar tone. And then finally, at the end of the record, you get one or two places with blast beats, and the riffs are actually good. And so that's a good example of, like, how can we transpose elements of this style to our genre without doing this sort of showy thing? Like, oh, look at our black metal influences, like here's the black metal part, you know what I mean? Yeah, it was just sludge shaded with black metal in a tasteful way. So I thought that was quite good, and I wanted to check out the new one. Did you get a look at what that first record was called? I think I heard you looking something up.
Well, I mean, I can pull it up.
Parish.
Parish.
I just found it. Yeah. That was 2017, so they've had some years to develop. Any other general thoughts from you before we dive in?
Honestly, man, I haven't listened to, like, a full sludge record in years. So, I mean, I mostly just stick to the stuff from the 90s that I know is good. And we were joking before we started that, you know, it's like, when I talk to, like, sludge or stoner doom people, it's always one of those situations where it's sort of like that meme with the stoner. It's like, no, this is a different strain, bro. Like, this is different. Like, sativa's a mental high, indica's a body high, bro. That's how I feel with, like, sludge and stoner evangelists, you know? So, but I'm saying that because I don't really have an idea for what the genre is currently doing. So you kind of split into these guys doing, like, more high on fire stuff, kind of conventional stoner sludge stuff, and then you've got the guys who split off and started doing post-rocky stuff, and then you got the guys who split off and started doing
there's quote-unquote atmospheric sludge, which is just slow screamo without riffs.
Well, that's just the old name for what's now post-metal, you know?
Yeah.
Very interesting the way the sort of like drift of vocabulary over the years. So I could compare this to some other bands just offhand, but the sludge problem, as you said, I think is that apart from this like handful of classic artists, they mostly all just sound like each other. You know, sludge sounds like sludge. It doesn't have a distinct idea. Now, there are distinct ideas on this record that I enjoy, but they get sort of overtaken by these sludge tropes that I'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, and I think also generally a thing with sludge would be the closer it gets to stoner doom, the worse it gets.
Oh, yeah,
that's
definitely.
the danger zone for sludge. The closer it gets to Black Sabbath, the worse it gets. The worse it gets. I think Black Sabbath's a great band that I don't listen to, but yeah, I mean, except if you hear it in the bar or the car or whatever, right? Great. And I get that the discography is rewarding to dig through, but I think as far as influence on stuff like sludge,
Well, I mean, the whole like stoner doom and sludge thing by way of Sabbath it's already over because Sleep did their albums. It's done.
Yeah.
Those were the best that it's going to be. You're not going to make something better than that. So why are we still aping it?
Yeah. Electric Wizard is already kind of middling entertaining, and then if you want to take a band that's derived from Electric Wizard,
You're in full-fledged,
Why?
just like bad territory. Yeah. So let's
start with a bit that I think is the hymn, typifies the parts of hymn that I know and love. This is Exit in Fire from this. I think this is from the beginning. Oh, I think we both chose things from this song.
Yeah, we both got clips. Yeah.
So what I like about that part is the part where it goes da dong dong da 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 dong da 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 da.
So the whole part, yeah.
I think this band has a commendable willingness to just hammer one note or one chord, and I really like the vocals are great because like the whole sludge thing is this kind of yell.
Yeah.
And it's often really affected. When sludge became really popular in the early 2000s was when people in extreme music started doing things like taking vocal lessons or caring a lot about technique. So a lot of the sludge yell is kind of simulated and highly clean. This guy's just yelling. I think he's just really good at yelling. And it sounds like he's standing kind of away from the mic. he's like in full power stance, just bashing that one note and yelling. And I think that's great. On the first record, it sounded like he was standing on top of a mountain, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can definitely... like, I can hear the... Because you're, like, actually a pretty big High on Fire fan, aren't you?
I actually am, yeah. I think in terms of, like, pure heavy metal, I think, or... My theory is that they're actually a proto-Black Death band at their best, but they're definitely one of my favorite just fun fucking metal bands.
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, I can definitely hear the High on Fire right here.
Yeah,
High on Fire will also sit on a note or a single strum pattern for a long time. And, you know, honestly, no, I think as far as, like, popular sludge stuff goes, High on Fire is probably, outside of, you know, Crowbar still operating and shit, probably one of the best. And,
for sure.
Matt is from Sleep, so, you know, I mean, I can't deny that. He's got a guitar technique way more sophisticated than most sludge bands.
Absolutely, yeah. But so what did you make of this one?
I mean, I like it. I think one of the things that I would amp up for this band is the drum production, because we're dealing with a two-piece where it's just drums, guitar, and vocals. And I think when you do that, the production of the individual instruments becomes much more important. So more and especially if you're going to do passages like this where you're just sitting on a single idea for 2 minutes, basically, those 2 minutes have to have exciting details within them. And that doesn't mean you need to change the way you write it, but it means that you need to emphasize the physical aspects of the instrument. And I feel like the drum production is just slightly flat, like with some more body. Like when you listen to Bell Witch, not this last terrible album, but earlier Bell Witch, it's got very sophisticated drum production, which helps to liven up when they're just dwelling on a single riff for 3 minutes at a time. So I think that's something that would aid this a lot.
I feel that. And, I mean, I think also the production's definitely shifted a bit from Parish. You'd probably get more drums on that one. Part of it also is that the guitar has closer to a conventional sludge doom tone. It's fuzzy. And the old tone was not so fuzzy. So this kind of warmer, fuzzier guitar, I think it can cover the drums more.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I understand where you're coming from. Well, they're doing this, like, occluded, like, orange amp sludge thing, which is kind of the standard sound, and they're probably losing some personality from that. But at the same time, they're probably going to sell more records to people by doing that.
Well, yes. I think my general sense for this is that they're... Well, we'll leave that for a sec. Let's go to the second part of Exit and Fire.
Yeah, so I've got a section of Exit and Fire where we get into what I'm imagining is the kind of stuff that attracted you on the first record. Not having heard it, but I'm guessing this is the kind of thing. So let's try this out. Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering, why didn't we sit on this one for 2 minutes? You know, I would listen to that for 2 minutes. You know, because I
that's the best part of the record.
Yeah, it probably is the single best moment on the record. So I really like the idea here, which is it's actually unique compared to other sludge bands with this like really aggressive, tight right hand work on the guitar. Reminds me a lot of people would say Meshuggah, but I would actually say Frederick Thornedal's side project, which was Frederick Thornedal's Special Defects, where he was just doing sort of like extreme jam music, instrumental with a drummer. And even the guitar tone is extremely similar. Obviously, it's Frederick Thorndahl, so the sort of time signatures you're hearing on that are fucking unbelievable. But I get a similar effect here. And
I definitely heard the Meshuggah thing on this, and I think that might have been present a little bit on their first record, but it's definitely come out more here.
Yeah.
I haven't heard Frederick Thorndahl's special effects.
special defect. It's very cool. I'll send you
special defects. Yeah.
I'll send you a video of him playing on like Swedish public access at one point. It's a great combination of Meshuggah and true free jazz that you'll really appreciate.
Cool.
But these are the moments on the record that I really like. It's like, it doesn't sound not sludge. It sounds contiguous with the sludge legacy, but it has more identity and more personality than a lot of the record to me.
Yeah, if it reminds me of anything within sludge proper, it reminds me of the chuggy early ISIS stuff. People often forget about ISIS before Panopticon now, but up through Oceanic, they were
I was about to say,
band.
you're thinking of like Oceanic. I like Panopticon a lot, actually. I think it's a very good record. But
I've been shown it by a friend since dissing it, and then I was like, oh, this is just a pretty good Tool record.
basically, it's a good post.
Maybe it's the follow-up to 10,000 Days that Tool never made, right? You know, it's a good kind of arty rock record, but it's not like Oceanic has this locked-in chug combined with this interesting chorded stuff. And the early ISIS, which I need to listen to more, is just all chug.
Well, yeah, it's more hardcore,
Yeah. Pelican also, the first Pelican record, Australasia, again, before they became a post-metal or post-rock band, they recorded this one really interesting EP that had enough in it for a full-length.
Yeah.
I think these days it would be counted a full-length, because it was like at least 30 minutes. I like
the first couple Pelican records, actually.
Who knows, maybe I'd like them now. I just remember that they had this monstrous distorted sound that they would just lock into huge chug parts and then pull out in these sort of lifts into major chord ideas and sort of melodic phrases that sounded like they were wrung with effort out of the instruments, which was really cool.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, so this has a little... I think this band at their best is moving towards that kind of Pelican thing, that Meshuggah thing, that ISIS thing. And I think, as you said, you don't really know what sludge is doing now.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think the incorporation of mathier ideas into sludge is a good idea. If you think about sludge and math rock as two genres that aren't good, I think they could really help each other out, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think there's people who have made gestures towards that, like Dysrhythmia is a very good instrumental band. I don't know if they're still around, but they did really cool sludge meets math meets post-rock stuff, early Rosetta. Rosetta was pretty good.
Oh, I've heard of them. Well, I think right now the paradigm for that would be Sumac, which is a side. You probably haven't heard that, but it's a side. It's like a new project of Aaron Turner from ISIS with Nick Yakshin, who was the drummer in a hardcore band called Baptist. That was basically just like a really good drummer who happened to have a hardcore band playing in front of him. The riffs were completely unremarkable, but the drumming was great. But so it's basically this crazy virtuoso sludge math death metal jam music.
Yeah.
You know, it just, my friend said to me, he's like, it sounds like they're so high when they recorded this. So like 50% of the songs have this incredible manic lightning bolt energy, and then 50% of it, then there's stuff that's a little meandering. But I feel like, Sumac maybe is driving that, and him are moving in that direction, but sounding more like Sumac in particular means you sound less like him.
Yeah.
And you're competing with two virtuoso players on their native ground. So I want to play a sample that captures, I think them at this record at its most kind of melodic mathy, with this sort of Pelican and Sumac vibe. And I think this is where they get it right. This is a very exciting passage.
Okay.
This is from the title track. So, beginning of that was all pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I really like the like skronky metalcore like high bar chord thing they're doing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I like how before that and after it, they've got this lift into the major key, the but it kind of chugs, right? Even that kind of lightning moment chugs, and that's a very early Pelican thing.
Yeah.
So that's a very that sequence really is a very dynamic kind of lots going on for a sludge album. 3 or 4 sick riffs in two-ish minutes. But then at the end, you hear they just kind of hang out in that major key idea for a while, don't they?
Yeah, well, I don't really necessarily mind that, because honestly, the first half of this record is way stronger than the second half, because, like...
Yeah, no, on second listen now, I think I don't mind them hanging out in it, because it is just a cool riff. Yeah.
So,
first half's way stronger, yeah.
Yeah, so I do enjoy that, and honestly, we've dwelled a lot on the stuff that we do like on this, but to be realistic and to warn people, there's a lot of shit that's not like that on this record. So I got one more sample. So, in fact,
This one is sinister.
I'm not gonna preface it with anything. Let's just listen to this passage off Crimson.
Oh my God.
And we'll talk about what the rest of this album is like. All right.
What an evil cackle.
Oh, yeah. No, you'll love it, man. It's great. That fucking sucks.
Yeah, I was saying to him during the break, but it's really like that meme with the nut button, right? This is like the suck button. It's just like, or it's in his array of pedals, you know, and it's just like stomps it right there.
And well, it feels like him as a band. It's like they've got their own ideas. They've got kind of interesting, cool ideas within the paradigm of sludge. But then they're like, well, let's play it safe for a while and do what the kids like. And apparently what the kids like, or what people imagine they like, is shitty, warbling, clean vocals and a bad Ozzy impression. And it always fucking sucks. And it's for boomers. And these are the things that fuck this record up over and over again. Are these tributes to like a bog standard ass sludge and stoner tropes.
Yeah, the problem is that they like this music. Right? The problem is that as they've been developing as musicians, I think the guitarist in this is kind of young, would be my guess. And as they've been developing as musicians, I think the idea is, now let's do one that sounds more like, I don't know, Electric Wizard or whatever. Or maybe that was supposed to be like a Messiah Marcolin thing,
no, it's probably way dumber than that, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stand that Messiah Marcolin's vocals, but, I should. That's the kind of thing that's supposed to be cool and tasteful to like, but I can't follow people
I don't
there.
really like it either, but...
Yeah. I do like, as far as Doom that I really do like, Reverend Bizarre.
Oh yeah, everyone loves
Reverend
Reverend Bizarre. Yeah,
Yeah, outstanding band.
that's great.
But
Or, like,
anyway,
even if we want to get like into more like dangerous, like speculative vocal territory, I love Warning to death. You know, they pull it off.
Warning, yeah.
Because the riffing and the melodic ideas are so intricate, they can sustain those sort of Messiah-style vocals. This fucking can't sustain these warbling, shitty, clean vocals.
The chording was just so, he was just playing a chord progression, right?
It's so boring.
And the vocals, a lot of care had gone into writing that vocal line, but the problem is it just wasn't good. And
just back to the drawing board, guys.
It was completely competently done. Everything about that was competent, and I mean, granted, we're not the target audience for that riff, but I don't think either of us can, in good conscience, let that go.
Uncommented.
That's probably the meanest we've been. I don't know if this is the meanest we've been to a record. I don't think so, but it's certainly the meanest we've been to any single part of a record. Yeah.
My thing is, like, especially listening back, the first couple songs are pretty fucking good, honestly. And then the record just nosedives on the last two.
I think you're right.
So I think I might have had
I
might have had a more negative perspective just because that left such a bad taste in my mouth. But the first couple songs really are kind of bangers, you know?
Yeah, I think there's some good... I think there's... At the very end of the record, there's some pretty cool atmospheric guitar that they could do more of. But for the rest of it, it really is, I don't know. The last song opens with this kind of spoken word stuff that might be a girl, I don't know, but it has this very unpleasant tone.
It's fucking
unbearable. It sounds like it sounds like an attempt to move toward grunge or Sonic Youth kind of things, which I get that makes sense as a move from sludge, but move to different parts of them and also don't do that.
Yeah, it's like please don't.
At least, I mean, if you want to start making rock music, that's one thing, but then you got to start making rock music. And I mean, it's certainly not very extreme.
That's definitely not.
Yeah, so I think the second half is kind of padded out with filler.
Definitely. Well, I mean, you were saying like towards the end of.
Unfortunately, I think that part that we sampled was supposed to be important, but there's a lot of filler.
Well, you were saying even like, there's some cool atmospheric guitar stuff at the end of the last track, Can I Carry You? Can I Carry You ends with like 4 minutes of ambient guitar waffling, dude. It's not good. It fucking sucks, man.
Oh, no, I just like the chord and the tone. I mean, it does this weird stuff like fading in and out, and then there are more of the vocal samples or whatever. Don't like any of that. There's just a moment where he hits the chord for like 30 seconds, and it's just like a cool sound object. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I would like to hear a riff written with that sound.
Yeah, your persistent charitability always impresses me.
No, I mean, literally, when I was listening through that album, I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I hoped it would be a riff, and then it wasn't. You know, that was the end of the record.
Yes. It's like, honestly, this isn't like the worst sludge thing I've heard, but honestly, dude, like the break in
it's far from the worst sludge. It's far from the worst sludge either of us has heard, right?
I mean, yeah. Honestly, I've forgotten all the worse ones. You know what I mean? It's like because honestly, a terrible sludge album is just background music. It just doesn't mean anything. It doesn't even stick out in your head as terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Split in two halves. Yeah, it seems like maybe this was a little bit rushed, would be my guess.
Yeah, which is weird given the 3-year gap, but like...
You know what it is? You know what it is? Rushed and simultaneously overambitious.
Yeah, I just wish they would just stick with the cool shit where their spirit obviously lies. You can tell there's more energy in like those parts of Exit Through Fire that we sample. It's like, oh, this is what you want to do, and then they just sound unmotivated on the back half. It's like, oh, we're doing this because we have to, you know?
Yeah, doing things they're doing things that you think you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
If the hymn guys are listening to this somehow, we had to say it about those vocals. We really did. I really liked the first record. I like this band. I want it to be good. but I gotta say it about those vocals. Just write us more of the Dugga Dugga stuff.
Yeah, just do a lot of that, and we'll probably fucking really enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll eat it up.
All right, so let's take a quick break and get back with our last album of the night.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, so last record of the night, we've got Dumal's The Confessor, and this is a band that you know I'm not familiar with, so what's the deal?
I guess I just found Dumal kind of randomly. I guess it must be 3 years ago now. Feels like forever ago. When I think I was still getting re-caught up with contemporary black metal. And they were... their last record, The Lesser God, I listened to once or twice, and I thought it was interesting because it was a American attempt to just make Americans making European black metal, and not in the sense that there have always been isolated American groups doing sort of second wave worship or Marduk worship or whatever, right? Yeah. It seemed like an attempt to do the kind of European black metal that's most relevant now, been most influential. So it struck me as very Finnish influenced, very Satanic Warmaster and Sargeist, but also I got the impression at the time, at least, also that there was supposed to be a kind of Slavic vibe on it. They've got a track on that one called Ukrainia, and a song title called The Path to the Fortress is Lined with Statues, which is sick and sounds like a Hate Forest title.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I got the sense they were trying to integrate Finnish and Slavic. And then we didn't hear from them for a few years, which these days, 3 years is a long time between releases. And at this point, I think they were kind of at the head of a trend, which is A, USBM finally getting good, and acquiring this sound that's... this band sounds very European, but they're very consistently, in terms of just being muscular and in your face, it fits in very well with something like Mortem, or with, or maybe with, to some degree, with Oldowan Gash. I'd say if it's analogous to anything, it would be kind of like Oppressive Descent, in that Oppressive Descent really is just a European band that happens to be in the U.S. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember the guy from... I remember the guy from Finn mentioning that he really liked Dumal, and there's an affinity there. Finn is also one of these more just muscular, go for the guttural kind of American heroic black metal bands, and this is thoroughly in that vein. So I was excited to hear the new one. What did you make of it?
I mean, the immediate comparison, not in style but in overall effect, is the Imha Tarakat record we reviewed a couple weeks ago, where this is musical candy that is focus tested for me. like I think you were saying even before we got to it, it's like, oh, the Dumal record, that's like 100% up your alley. And yeah, you're correct. No, this is 100% of basically what I want from melodic black metal. But what's interesting here is, so Imha Tarakat had this kind of like Finno-French sensibility. This, the biggest comparison, obviously there's a lot of...
I mean, it sounded like Migla to me, but yeah.
To a degree, but way more ostentatious and blown out than Migla.
Yeah. There were a lot more sort of big kind of classically black metal trem riffs in it too, which was one of the things I liked about it. Yeah.
So I definitely hear the Finnish stuff because there's Sargeist all over this record. But the biggest thing overall, which will become a point of discussion between us, because you've admitted this is a blind spot for you, is Take, which I think is the single...
I think it's Toke.
It is properly pronounced Toke, but when he plays in the U.S., when a host is doing vocals, he says Take, because he's just like, fuck it, whatever. So I'm an American.
I like that. I like that. Like, I would never say, I could never bring myself to say, do you like Sire Roos? It's, for Sigur Rós,
Oh, is that how it's supposed to be pronounced? Okay.
Something like that. I've got My buddy is currently studying Old Norse philology. I think we got to sample him on the show pronouncing these names.
That would be
That's
good.
a plan for the future.
But yeah, honestly, like, Take is, like, the single biggest thing. Specifically, those first 3 Take records that I think are essential, which we'll absolutely be covering on a bonus episode at one point. It's just a super listenable, very smooth record. I've got some, like, small quibbles with it, but overall, yeah, I mean, I just love this shit. You know, half these riffs sound like things that I've written myself, so I'm like, 100%, let's fucking go for it. So, actually, let me just open up with a great example of that with a track called Some Ritual, which features 3 giant Sargeist riffs just lined up one after another. So, let's give that a shot. So I could basically just run that song all the way through, but we were talking while I was playing, and you were like, yeah, sometimes you say Sargeist and I'd say Satanic Warmaster, but in this case, yeah, those are just straight Let the Devil In Sargeist riffs.
Yeah, this is what we all know and love from Let the Devil In. And some bands, often when they're imitating precisely that very smooth, flowing sound, is when I think a lot of bands... You know that I don't like a lot of bands that try too hard to imitate that kind of smoothness. These guys just kill it, right?
Well, yeah, just because their understanding of the individual riff craft is so natural.
And these are melodic but powerful. Right.
And honestly, I would say, even for, trying to bridge onto this discussion of modern USBM as being a style, I guess it's kind of ironic, but I think that one of the essential components to that is Sargeist. I think that just because talking to people in my local scene, Sargeist has become a touchstone for average black metal people in a way that I don't think is fully recognized by, like, internet metal people yet. You know what I mean? I think they're a much more important band for where black metal is going to go over the next 10 years than people fully understand.
I think Sargeist, and I think I do think melodic Satanic Warmaster. People haven't picked up as much on the the power chord riffs in Satanic Warmaster are often pretty good, but that's not anything distinct from Norse Second Wave.
Well, it's kind of interesting how
his real technical innovation is like the big florid riffs.
It's interesting how long it takes these things to trickle down, because Let the Devil In came out in 2010, but it's really only over the past couple years that you've started to hear people constantly recreating that, which is funny because there's been a couple Sargeist records since that simply aren't as good as Let the Devil In, you know?
I think Sargeist is very inconsistent. I think he's most consistent with Horna, but even Horna is a little inconsistent, right? Their last couple haven't been that good.
Oh yeah, Horna's all over the map for me. I've heard Horna records that are outstanding, and I've heard Horna records that are super mediocre.
Yeah, and Vatnogs and Wolfsong or whatever is...
I couldn't tell you which ones those are, because, you know, the Finnish titles.
Okay, and Vatnogs Eflosanog or whatever is really good. The one with the wizard and the scroll. And then
okay.
Sanoyesi Arele, the one with the wizard and the prophetic scrolls. Again, it's actually the same idea, kind of, or maybe a cauldron. Sanoyesi Arele is their best one.
Okay.
But yeah, so Horna has not been that influential.
Yeah, it's funny because Sargeist was technically just a Horna side project originally, but now it's like one of the most important and influential black metal bands out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, really just from riff to riff, this record is like, I mean, it's way the fuck up there, man. Like, just their ability to string together all of these A+ Sargeist or Take style riffs is sort of unmatched.
And during that sample, we were talking about how good the drums are at changing it up under those and not letting it sit on any of those riffs.
Which is very important to the style, because I could definitely see those riffs just becoming sort of annoying without that dynamic drum presence where we're constantly shifting. Every couple of repetitions, change up the beat, give it variation, give it color, you know?
All right, and so here we'll go to my note of constructive criticism. However, it features one of my favorite riffs on the record. Also, I do really like this album, and so...
But your constructive criticism probably has a lot to do with mine, so this is good.
I agree. About. No, I think we agree on what the issue is. So this is from Devour the Child, and it's from the back end, but I'm going to give you some context for it. So we're going to start with one of my favorite riffs on the record, but it's for the first 2.5 minutes of this track, which is this the first track on?
Yeah, it's the opening
track on the record. Yeah. Okay, opening track. So for the first few minutes, this is just a great sort of glorious sounding Sargeist track in the vein the death metal guy just described, and then they throw in this much more aggressive riff, and then they run through some reps of this. That's the context. So when this sample comes in, the really aggressive riff that I love has already repeated once, and the transition section, kind of breakdown release section, has already repeated once. And now we're about to cycle through them again.
Okay. Let's shoot it out.
Well, death metal guy, you've come face to face with your ancient enemy.
And our ancient enemy, for those who are just picking up the podcast, because we've discussed this many times before, but for the new people from Grizzly Butts, what is my ancient enemy, black metal guy?
Interrupting Dark Throne riff.
In the shadow of the horns!
Yeah. So there are a few... So basically, I think if you listened to that sample, you can understand there are some structural issues with this.
Yeah.
That first riff that we start on, right? It sort of comes... There's sort of a break in the song. There's this Sargeisty stuff before this. Then this break. Then there's this riff that could be a Hate Forest riff, has this droning quality. Also could be... I think you said I probably overstated the Slav quality on this. I think you're right.
I don't really hear a lot of Slav on this record in general.
That could be a Hate Forest riff, and it sounds kind of like the stuff on Precambrian or on the newer Winterfell.
I think the riff that you're talking about, that like second one, that's actually that could be like a Take riff, but they would use it as an interrupter, like just a couple repetitions before getting into another full idea.
Oh, well, yeah, and I thought about it. That could also be, that's not a distinctively Hate Foresty riff at all. It could also be on one of the Swedish bands I like Dawn or Marduk. Yeah. And it could actually, Horna does a lot of one-string drone riffs. It could be like a Horna riff in terms of Horna actually influencing people. So, but you get to this more storming riff that I really like. And then it just they just sit on it for a while. And this record doesn't really have, at least at this point in the record, we'll get to that, there's not the kind of change-ups from the drums you would expect that would help drive it forward. And there's not much other interplay going on, nor is there an atmospheric effect from the production, right? Yeah. This record has this very in-your-face, bright, kind of smooth, homogeneous guitar tone. Yeah. And so although this part bites a lot harder, you're not getting like sort of immersed in this hammering part. And then it would just throws us into this Dark Throne riff, and now you're like, are we in a new song? Because that thing was supposed to be the back end of the track surprise that every really good black metal song has, right?
But then you want to bring it back home to give it a sort of a logical endpoint that resonates with the beginning structure of the song, right?
Yeah, maybe just take it someplace new that has something to do with the first few riffs. Take it back into Finnish riff land, into Sargeist riff land, but different. Yeah. Whereas, like, going out of that kind of attack riff into just the Shadow of the Horns riff is jarring. And then I'm like, well, okay, what are they going to do with this? And then they just rock that out. And it has this very, like, in parts of the record like this, it has a very just grab this section and extend it quality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my main criticism of this record is kind of like you said. There tends to be a riff slideshow quality to a lot of these songs. Now, the reason why I love this record anyway is that those riffs that they are sliding through happen to be so goddamn good for the most part.
Yeah, I think as far as variations on In the Shadow of the Horns, that's a great riff. And when it goes to the skank beat, I like it a lot. But that could be in a different song.
Yeah, no, I actually really enjoy it a lot. And, even there, I hate the interrupting Dark Throne riff, but it still kind of works there just because they're so good at individual riff craft. But I guess, if there really is one criticism I have for the record, the only thing that stops them from being sort of at the very top echelon of US black metal is a sort of consistent sense that, and I'm going to say this, a lot of metal songs, probably even the majority of metal songs are written like this, but you get the sense that this is written on guitar all the way through, and then it's brought to the rest of the members, and they hash it out in the rehearsal space, which is fine. I mean, God knows I've written a ton of songs like that, but you get this quality that it's like, it's lacking a little bit of the detail and a little bit of the fine tuning and the sort of like surprising live quality that elevates this music from great to outstanding. You know?
And when it has this kind of just written on the guitar, very guitar forward quality, very sort of a lot of these kind of smooth, triumphant Sargeist riffs, then structure is all the more important, because that's an important part of where your drama comes from. And if you just hang out someplace, or you just sort of change things up kind of arbitrarily, whereas other bands can get away with that in all sorts of ways, here, if you're depending completely on riffs and the way the riffs talk to each other, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And the best way I can relate this to another band that you should check out, that you would really like, called Totenbach from Germany. This is a band I think is great. I own the tape. Strongly support this band. That guitarist is one of the best at doing this kind of Sargeist SWM stuff.
Yeah.
He's about in the same league as this guy. And there are some parts on that record, on the Totenbach record, the individual riffs are just jaw-dropping killer, honestly, to me. And then there are parts that, because it's like this, will just drag a bit, you know? Like, there's like a killer stomp riff on one song where it's just like 40 seconds or a minute too long, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
it's, back to you.
Well, no, I think you mostly covered it. So let me jump into another sample, and this is where I'm going to get into the real like Take comparisons, because we've been dwelling on a lot of the Finnish stuff so far, but honestly, the major mode that this sits in is Take.
It succeeds at not being a Sargeist clone, despite how Sargeisty it is.
Yeah. So, and Take is just kind of a fascinating band just because they're a band from Norway, which has always sounded very outside of the conventional Norwegian black metal sound. But I chose a sample off a track called Unrealized Dreams, which is, I think, possibly the most Take that this record sounds. So it's just the opening of Unrealized Dreams. So let's give that a shot.
I love that last one.
Well, and that is why we definitely have to do a bonus episode filling you in on Take, because...
that's something we promised some of our earliest listeners.
Yeah, we should schedule that for next week or something, but...
Yeah, well, I listened... I went and listened to Over Björkvin Himmerik, and I could hear it, but, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and actually, while you bring that one up, I'm pretty sure that at least the second riff on this sample is a variation of something on Over Björkvin. I couldn't exactly tell you. Like I said, the first three Take albums are formatted as whole albums. It's like they don't have titles or anything. So, like I was saying, I'm not hearing the Slavic stuff. Maybe that was more present on the first record. For here,
I'm not even sure. I listened to the first one cursorily. I mean, for here, I would assume it with... I think there is definite Slavic influence on... Even just in the name, on a track called Through Fields of Peasant Graves. And the closing track, Amalgamation, Time, Space, whatever.
That's like an astrophase thing, yeah.
Yeah, those have a big Druid kind of sound and a droning kind of chord block sound that I do think is Slavic.
Yeah.
But
but I think what makes this interesting
the
is
primary sound. No, I agree. I was wrong.
this is definitely cut from Scandinavian scene. So, well, I say take a lot, but the reality is, even though take is from Norway, I always lump them more into kind of the Swedish style, because I think there is. I think take sounds more like Sacramentum than they do most Norwegian black metal, in a way.
And certainly those are the parts of their records that people have seized on the most. Like,
Definitely.
with Overbjörgvin, I was struck by how there are certain of those kinds of riffs that go on to be really influential. He's one of the first people to do this kind of budget epic sliding power chord kind of consonant triumphant melody thing. But he actually, on that record, doesn't do it in that many places. But he does it enough that it's really memorable.
It has an outsized influence,
Yeah.
Like some of the riffs on those early take records are so important and so influential that you forget in retrospect, oh, they were just like 30 seconds of a song,
Yeah, so I think we're saying, like, Toko is kind of ahead of their time, and maybe a bigger influence on contemporary black metal than a lot of the more known Norwegian bands now, right?
Definitely.
So,
I mean, I think at this point, they're basically revered as only barely under the, like, big five of the second wave.
Sure. I mean, he's a sophisticated guitarist,
Honestly, he's probably more sophisticated than anyone apart from Euronymous from the second wave. Euronymous and, Isan.
And Infernus at his best, I think. And Isan. Isan and Infernus are...
Infernus when he tried,
Yeah, exactly. Infernus Shrine.
But I guess what's interesting to me about this record is it's one thing to imitate take, but it's another thing to do, like, protracted instrumental section before the vocals come in where you're just letting the guitars speak, which is something the take really kind of pioneered apart from, Burzum or something, where long instrumental sections where there was no need to have vocals, where they understood that the melodies were expressing all the fundamental parts of the song.
Yeah, and they're good enough to carry it. So there's what I have to say is, to me, I think this album, you are better than me usually at noticing when something's been recorded in 2 sessions. Mm-hmm. The sense I get about this record is that after some midpoint, the issues I have with the structure of some of the earlier tracks, although I don't think I could find anything wrong with fucking Black Tendrils. That was just rips. But the structural quibbles that we have, to me, totally go away towards the end. And to me also, I don't know if you could hear it, but to me the production sounds rawer and liver, and like there's more loose playing in the band. Am I crazy? Did you hear that too?
To a degree, I think it could go either way. I do understand.
I almost think like the levels go up on the guitars and other things.
I understand the quality that you're talking about. It wasn't like radically distinct, because usually when I point it out, it's like there's an obvious production difference. Here, the production difference is like a little bit more subtle, but I could see these songs being sort of written in 2 batches. So you get an altogether different effect. Yeah, I could see that.
I think they're written in 2 batches, and I think the songs at the beginning they've led with some that have very strong, catchy individual riffs, and put the things that are more fully integrated songs at the end, which is kind of clever, because the cool riffs will get you through the first half, and then normally when you'd be thinning out, I mean, to me, I really like the main part of Through Fields of Peasant Graves, but some of the end not so much. But when Unrealized Dreams come in, I'm just like, yeah, hell yeah, like fucking kill.
Well, now I want a reminder of the back half. I want to hear your other sample, because I have kind of a theory. So let's what do you got next?
Ossueric Inversion. I've got a sample from this. I wish I could play you the whole song. This to me is just if we've gone from just collection slideshows of riffs, this is a fucking song. I love this one. This might be one of the songs of the year for me, you know.
All right.
So
let's get that
definitely
track.
up there.
I like how you ended that right before the hyper dank riff.
Yes, that's a surprise for our listeners.
You got to listen to the album if you want to hear the rest of that.
You gotta listen, man. That could you hear how the whole band just sounded rabid there, as opposed to before, where they were just more in the pocket?
Yeah, the earlier ones sounded more controlled. So my theory is that, especially off Unrealized Dreams and then going into that, it's like, I think that the first 4 songs were kind of composed distinctly from the last 3, and I think you're seeing a switch from Finnish into kind of like take, more kind of like folk influence stuff on the back half.
I hear that, although there are still some big Finnish payoff moments, which I think are important, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to leave completely, but I think I think their interests in the moment shifted a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that represents development for the band beyond the... you can be a very good version of the current Sargeist thing, or you can carry that into something more distinctive. And I think effectively integrating that with these often more neglected sides of Second Wave, which just isn't trendy now, stuff. I mean, aside from these weird, very band campy Second Wave reconstruction bands, which are very kind of often very mannered in the way that we don't like that much.
Yeah.
But this is a really good way of keeping that alive. I mean, that first just storming blast riff, again, when I first listened, I might have thought, oh, kind of a Hate Forest riff. Well, it could be, but only because Hate Forest liked Kvist and Nidden, as we talked about before, Nidden Division 187. That's just a crushing mid or late 90s Scandi riff. I love that shit with the punk beat.
It's not too far from the kind of like chivalric black metal stuff from France that you like a lot these days.
No, and it could also be like Treldum or Storin. It's a pretty bar.
It could be like all the cool shit that we like.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. Towards the end of the record, they've got tons of shit for you in here, and towards the end, they shift up to the Toka, which is still just you love, And then they start bringing in all this shit that I love, and just the playing seems just far more fiery here. And then they're about to and then there's that soaring kind of dawn kind of riff that just, the big climax there, and then you guys are going to fucking love the end of the track. how many more riffs are there? Are at least 2 to 3 more huge riffs in this song.
So honestly, I think that if they compose their stuff a little bit more naturally, a little bit more organically, like spend a little bit more time in the rehearsal room versus constructing these things on their own, we'll have something that's like non-negotiably top tier for the US scene.
Maybe also bring the bass out a bit more, because it's a trio.
I could see that.
And it's a trio, and actually, when I was playing that sample of the part that the riff I really liked, but where it kind of hung out for too long, and Devour the Child, the bass was actually doing, very often the bass in these kinds of Stargeist worship bands just totally follows the root. Well, in all kinds of black metal, that often happens, The bassist wasn't. He was descending in a kind of cool way, moving in an opposite direction to the riff, but you could barely hear it. So if the bassist is right, it sounds like the bassist is writing his own parts that have kind of contrapuntal vibes, and given he's an important part of this trio, bring the bassist out a bit more,
You sound like a bassist saying that.
I am not. I am completely a reptile brain rhythm guitarist.
Same here, buddy. Same here.
The only riff on that I could even come close to playing would be the da 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 da.
Oh, you're selling yourself short.
That's a kind of riff I write.
You're selling yourself short.
What?
Most of this stuff's fairly straightforward to play.
Oh no, it's fairly straightforward, but that's like the kind of riff I write.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So a great album, and I'm gonna steal the mic because I get to choose the outro song this time. Me.
No, you should. I'm actually glad that you are doing that. It is by far your turn.
So, a band that I have referenced, very like cool guy, late second wave stuff. Have you actually listened to Bak De Syv Fjell?
God, I think I might have tried a couple times, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, started the YouTube and then got distracted or whatever.
I gotcha.
I get what the idea... I get that this is probably great and that I should listen to it, but no.
Well...
Yeah.
Here's your opportunity. So I chose these guys because they're from Norway. They're doing folky black metal. They did a demo and then an EP in 97, and then they broke up. Their band name means Behind the Seven Mountains, referring to Bergen, Norway's Seven Mountains. And then Take means fog from Bergen, Norway, about the fog around Bergen's mountains. Oh.
And the Bergen scene is a lot more melodic in general, right?
Yeah, they are, definitely. As distinct from like Oslo or Trondheim or something like that. So let's just do the title track off their 1 7-inch EP called From Haavardstun. It's been something that's stuck with me for a long time, and I think as a big Hades fan, you're gonna fucking love this one. So,
well, thanks, bro.
Thanks, guys, for listening. As usual, like, comment, subscribe on your platform of choice, and give us your money on Patreon or Subscribestar, and we will be back with you next week. Thanks for listening.
All right. Peace, dudes.
I hope my son's will